Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and I am the host of the Eddy Network podcast, which you have logged on to watch. I'm in the middle of a series of repeats of conversations that I had back in 2023 at the beginning of the Eddy Network podcast. And who I'm talking to today is Mark McGrath. Mark McGrath is very interesting to me because he has taken the work of John Boyd and has expanded it to be not just an interesting idea or an interesting strategy or a conversation that you can talk around at a party or at the bar. Now he's actually built a business around the idea of how do you take John Boyd's OODA loop and actually make it workable in the context of business and in life. And so I've been following John Boyd's work for 20 years now, and I have a deep appreciation for it because it is oriented around change. And so I invited Mark to come on, and we're going to have a conversation about change and about the OODA loop and about John Boyd and why he matters to us today. I thank you for watching. I hope this will be an enjoyable thing and hope you will find that Mark McGrath is someone that you need to be following. So I thank you, and I'll see you next time here on the Eddy Network podcast. Bye bye. Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. My guest today is Mark McGrath. We just met, but we have a lot in common. And I'm really glad that you're here. I'm excited about this. I wish we had a couple of days to talk about all the things all these touch points that we find in our lives that we share. And I think that's what's really interesting about networking is that we find these places that we share that are really meaningful to us. So thank you for coming on. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Ed. It's an honor to be here and talk about this. I'm sure this won't be the last time.
Sure.
I'm positive of that. So I'm Mark McGrath. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I grew up an Army brat, lived all over the world. I graduated from Marquette University with a BA in history, which I'm told is now the rarest major. So I'm one of them, I guess.
I have a son that was a history major. Yeah.
One of the few. I have a master's in economics. I spent 6 years as an officer, active duty in the Marine Corps, graduating from Naval ROTC. I went to Marquette on a Naval ROTC scholarship, where I first came into contact with the theories that we'll discuss. I had a brief stint in medical sales for about 15 months. That was my sort of transition out of the military job. And then I spent almost 20 years in the asset management industry, really finding a home to apply the theories I had learned for preparing for war fighting, applying them to the ups and downs, volatility, complexity of capital markets, which I love, and it's a lot of fun. And I still trade futures, so I really try to apply these every day in that respect.
You're a brave soul.
I'm 22 years married to a registered nurse who nursing is a phenomenal application of the things that we'll talk about. She's got this from day one. We have 4 teenagers. I have a college swimmer, a freshman.
Wow.
I have 2 boys in high school, so a daughter in college, 2 boys in high school, and then a daughter in 8th grade going on 40. And all are year-round swimmers. And we've taught them a lot of the things we'll talk about. My kids are actually pretty well versed in this stuff, which drives my case home that it's accessible to anybody. But yeah, we live in Columbus. So right now I'm one of the partners owners of AGLX, the chief learning officer of AGLX. There's 5 of us. We're all military veterans. We are an adaptive strategy consultancy. We apply.
And let's get into the meat of this conversation.
Sure.
And tell us about the strategist that is really behind a lot of what you guys are doing.
Correct. Yeah, that's where I connected with Brian Rivera, goes by his call sign Paunch. He's a naval aviator. Brian and I had connected years ago realizing that we both had the same understanding of who we're going to talk about, John Boyd and his theories, and the opportunity came up to join on with them and the rest of our team at AGLX, because you can basically work what I'm pursuing academically and living and loving. So to make it business is really exciting. You're familiar with our podcast, and for the listeners, our podcast is called No Way Out, and it's actually dedicated to advancing and developing the theories of John Boyd. That is a significant foundation of the professional work we do as consultants, coaches, strategists, that kind of thing.
And that's why I invited you to come on here, because I want to talk about John Boyd, who I'm a fan of John Boyd.
Oh yeah.
He may be the most the smartest guy of the 20th century, with the broadest perspective of the world of probably anybody. I'm not sure anybody matches him, and therefore he's got something to say to all of us. And I'm really interested in hearing what you think about him in relationship to the world we're living in now, and maybe two or three things that really kind of that you use all the time in talking with people, particularly people who are unfamiliar with John Boyd, and why what he has to say really matters.
Well, there's a lot of ways we could take that. I would start by saying that those that might be somewhat familiar with him or think they're very familiar with him, it's possible that they've reduced him to what he's most associated with, OODA loop. And the unfortunate fact of that is it's a broad misunderstanding of 99% of everything else that he was doing, which is his real work, which we're, that's our life's mission, really, and our business mission is to continue to develop those ideas. I like the way, I mean, what for me, what I've been able to pursue and continue to learn and understand is I feel that what a lot of the things that Boyd was saying, specifically around human observation, decision, action, and learning, it's axiomatic, it's a priori, and he may have figured this out too, that you can't debate things that are a priori. I mean, that's a waste of time, so I've tried to show people, you've seen maybe a lot of my LinkedIn posts, you get a lot of Boyd haters, because there's a lot of them that would say, well, OODA doesn't apply here, or OODA doesn't apply here. And my simple question, were there humans and were they making decisions and actions? The answer is always yes, because that's all we do. Voluntary, involuntary, consciously, subconsciously. We're constantly observing, orienting, deciding, and acting as time advances. That's our experience in the universe. Yeah. That's how we operate.
I have seen as a consultant for, since the mid-90s, that people's ability to make decisions, to solve problems, to think, is captured by the structures of the world, which in many ways are simply binary. So you're making these binary choices, which just does not ever really get you to a point of seeing the bigger picture. And that's what I think John Boyd is about, is capturing the larger scope of what's going on and being able to make decisions that lead to action that carries your mission forward.
So back to the meat of your question, I think that many, not all, but many are searching for binary answers, formulaic recipes, linear solutions to a nonlinear, complex world that's asymmetric and is different, continuously different. And a lot of the, as you say, we're in interesting times, or we're in times where I think that the imperative nature of learning Boyd and understanding Boyd deeply, not at a surface level, shows exactly what you just said, that the universe is not binary at all. And looking at every, what we're told are major issues, looking at everything as if there's only two sides of something is completely missing the mark. And I think that that's what leads to obsolescence. That's what leads to irrelevance. That's what leads to degrading decision cycles over time, is that we become misaligned with reality. And, our internal operating system that we've received, you know, wherever it came from, that which empowers us to address all of those things in a way where that complexity can become an advantage. That's what Boyd is pointing us in that direction. That's what we certainly do from a business standpoint. Our tag is confidence and complexity. I mean, that's what we believe that we're doing is helping people gain the confidence they need to see complexity as an advantage and not as an inhibitor, because complexity is the state of the universe in any respect, in any.
So when you walk into an organization, you know, they invite you in, you're going to start talking about these ideas. How do you define complexity to them? What's the language you use there? Because I think a lot of people hear that word, but they don't know what that means.
Depending on the audience, because it can range.
Mm-hmm.
I like to focus on complexity as the interdependencies seen and unseen, the things that we may or may not be aware of our connectedness. And, you know, we don't have all day, but I could give you countless examples. And the one I use a lot is, everybody knows 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon, right? And there's less than 6 degrees of separation, but the game 6 degrees. I don't know if millennials and Gen Zs play 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon, but in the day, Gen Xers, that was a big game for us, you know, and I was really good at it. I've found that with any one person you meet, you can find, for me, it's usually around 2. I would bet, if I had to speculate what my average was, it's 2 degrees of separation. We're connected in so many ways that we don't even understand, and that's amplified by our current state-of-the-art technology has made us even more connected than we ever did. It's more intricate. It's more of a lattice work of different people, places, and things that all come together. One of the great economic writers, books that I recommend frequently to people of a non-economic background, so my master's degrees in economics, is Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And one of the things that he talks about, the lesson is understanding that there's both the seen and the unseen, and you have to try to endeavor to understand both. You can't just focus on what you see, because the ripple effects and the lasting effects will continue throughout time. I always joke that if my one of my it was in my fellow officers in my battery, if he hadn't come over and dragged me out of bed on a Sunday afternoon after a weekend of partying to go down to Duke's at Waikiki with him, and made me get up and shower and shave and go down with him, I never would have met my wife, because his decision to force me out of bed, wake up, we're going, I don't want to go, no, we're going, get up, shower. I slept in the car the whole way down. 10 minutes later, I meet my wife of 22 years and 4 children, right? So we don't understand those connections, but they're all around us.
Right.
That lattice work of interconnectedness, it's around us. And as I said, it's amplified. Another example I've used on podcasts before when I'm asked this question is my daughter and I, a few years ago, she was getting recruited by various schools for swimming, and we wound up in the Denver airport. And she said, "Daddy, man, this airport is packed." And I said, "The funny thing is, we're going to walk by people we know, maybe personally, maybe somebody I went to college with, maybe somebody you know from somewhere. We'll have no idea they're there. But we might be given the chance to connect that and see that, and it's all around us. We just don't look for it."
Yeah, that, you know, the intricate nature of the world we live in is very complex, but in that complexity, it's very simple, because it is that those connections that we make with people, and you know, once we begin to see that, I see what Boyd is talking about is this larger picture of the world, and that you know, let's use the OODA loop as a way of getting at that. So
sure.
So describe the four parts of the OODA loop real quickly.
Well, OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, act. The loop in quotes, which was how he wrote it in quotes, because you know, it's not really a loop, and we could get into that. But the OODA loop is the loop is actually how we learn and how we understand and how we reinform our orientations. When I teach Boyd and OODA, I start with orientation. Or orientation
I like that.
is
I like that.
Yeah. So orientation is our in that technology mimics nature, right? So I always use just sort of the example. I don't know how great it is, but of an internal operating system of a smartphone or an iPad. Orientation is our internal operating system. Orientation is how we shape what we see, how we shape what we decide, how we shape how we act, how we shape how we learn. And as we learn, we update, revise, we shatter previous models to continuously keep that internal operating system matched to reality. And I explain it to the neophyte by saying, or the novice by saying that just like in your iPhone, if you're not updating it, if you're not revising it, if you're not putting in new software, what's going to happen? Well, you become subject to viral threats, or you become obsolete, or it can't function correctly.
Right.
The same thing goes for the thing of orientation in that respect, that orientation is our operating system. Here's the really interesting thing. Every one of them is unique. An orientation is like a fingerprint. Even if we're all in the same team, every Marine, there's places where we intersect and work together to coordinate action and become Marines and form a Marine Corps. But each Marine, each person, each individual, their orientation is unique as a fingerprint, because we all have different backgrounds, culturally, genetically, everything. We're all unique. We're all different. So that's where I start. OODA, OODA, the ability to observe, the ability to process those observations through our orientation, formulating decisions, formulating actions, and learning. OODA is nothing more than how the orientation functions axiomatically in the world. OODA loop is nothing more than an illustration, and it's the last one that he accepted before he passed. 1997 was when John Boyd died. The OODA loop, as we know it, if you Google it and you look at the Wikipedia page and you see this intricate diagram, it's a diagnostic map of how orientation functions, but it's not perfect. It's not complete. It evolved over time, and it would continue to evolve had he lived. And I think that's what we're ultimately picking up and continuing that work. But that's OODA loop described. So that's how I always describe it. Orientation, understand. Yeah,
that's really great. And I think the thing I'm hearing you say, and I think this is really important for people to understand, is that when you grasp that sense of orientation, when you figure out what your orientation is, and you're using it to observe the world, you have stepped away from the influences that are right there. So you can see it more objectively, and you can say, oh, I'm not going to go in this direction. I'm going to go in this direction. It's a way of really making really sound, healthy decisions. And I find that that's not how people make decisions normally. They don't have that sense of detachment. In fact, it's the opposite. It's a totally immersion emotionally in that context, where they become kind of imprisoned by the situation as it unfolds.
We're tribal people. We're pack animals. We like to do things in groups. We don't like to be isolated from the crowds. We don't like to do things differently than what the herd is doing. We're prone and subject to contagion. We're prone and subject to what we read in the newspaper, or what we just dated ourselves, right? Read in the newspaper, or about what we saw on social media, or what we see on YouTube or whatever. We don't, as in days past. I think that the ability, the training, the ability, the ability to think independently and differently, to maintain observer status, to weigh things out on your own and process them through your own orientation, is probably harder now than it's ever been in history. And it seems to be with more different types of technology. I think it's getting harder and harder to do that. But I think that that's really why Boyd is important, because becoming good at this, becoming effective at this, and constantly learning and practicing this is how we unleash the power of that computer, how we unleash the cognitive power of the human mind to thrive in the world that is always characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
So with your clients, where you're applying these principles, these disciplines, these models, what do you see happening in these companies where this stuff is being absorbed and they're processing it and they're learning how to use it? What does it look like once they begin to live this out? They embody the Boyd system, shall we call it, and they see change happening to themselves and to their organization. So what does that look like? You know, because part of what I'm wanting is for people to be convinced that this is a place that's worthy of their investment of time in learning about this approach to living.
That's the key word, living, derivative from life. Those that get and understand this, those that work to continue to understand it and improve it and apply it, will find that it informs every aspect of their life, because it's only applicable where humans are making decisions and acting. And that's everywhere in the universal experience. So a lot of times I get people to tell me, and I taught this, I've been teaching this for years, not just in my current role, but for years. This is how I would connect with people to do business with them. Very few will really get and understand this. And when they do, they see it literally applies everywhere. That's when the results go like that, because people see that this only applies. It's also too, it's not only universally applicable, and we're doing it anyway, subconsciously or consciously. I always tell people, like, hey, you're subject to these things. These things are occurring, whether you're aware of them or not, whether you care about it or not, whether you listen to me or not, you're still subject to these things. And the funny thing is, you're already doing this. My case to you is that by better understanding that what you're already doing and becoming aware of how your orientation shapes your observations, how your orientation shapes your decisions, and shapes your actions, and shapes your learning, and ultimately shapes your ability to adapt in anything that you do, business, marriage, team sports, anything. Traffic. Everybody's dealing with this in traffic, driving in traffic, that might be listening to us in traffic over a cup of coffee or whatever. You're going to see that your results are going to generally improve across the board. And that was really what Boyd said. Those that understand this, and those who can handle change and the rate of change faster than others, and can see things differently and identify gaps and mismatches faster than others, or faster than weather, or faster than the rate of change, they're the ones that are going to thrive versus just merely surviving.
Is that a quality of leadership that is maybe new, that notion of speed, the speed of decision and action? Because when I started doing leadership work back in the mid-'80s, it wasn't like this. It was the hierarchical structure was that everything, and the guy at the top, he was the hero, and everybody else was non-existent, so to speak. But then things began to change pretty rapidly. And the people and I got involved with a lot of entrepreneurs, and what I found was the people who were capable of thinking quickly, thinking on their feet, making decisions, acting on their decisions, and as soon as they've acted on the decision, just orienting themselves to that decision to see whether it was the right decision, or what the next decision to mitigate the problems may have come with the decision. All that speed of decision making and stuff, and interaction with people, really, it seemed like that was a new thing that was emerging in organizational culture.
Certainly not in the organization where I learned this. In the U.S. Marine Corps, speed is of the essence, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, Boyd, the U.S. Marine Corps was really one of the great paradigms of organizations and cultures that John Boyd had a direct and impactful influence on for many years and still does to this day. I define, in the Boyd sense, I would say that speed is quick and deliberate action. I think many of us are prone to haste, just doing things to do things quickly and rapidly. I would suggest that in the Boyd sense, that quick and deliberate action that I in turn learn from and make the necessary revisions that I need to as circumstances continue to unfold, that's speed. Because ultimately what we're trying to gain is a time advantage. Our time is limited. Every person you've ever met has a finite block of it that's indefinite. We have no idea how long it is, and we ought not waste it. And one way to not waste it is to keep our orientations matched to the reality as it unfolds, constantly challenging assumptions, constantly making changes, constantly understanding that it's not going to always be that way because the world is dynamic, not static. Thus, our interaction with it must be dynamic. It cannot be static in anything we do. Certainly business. So we say this on our podcast quite often, and we tell others, hey, listen to this stuff before your competitors do. Or it's likely I could be working with your competitors. What if I was? Like, what if, that's another thing that John Boyd really has shown. I think that a lot of the value for John Boyd to entrepreneurs, to businesses, to companies is really as they get to understand it, they become more competitive, and they understand that. I always use the example of David and Goliath, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to help David be the best David that David can be, and not delude themselves to think that they're Goliath. If David thinks he's Goliath and fights like Goliath, Goliath is going to beat him every time.
Right.
But by orienting effectively with speed, with variety, with decentralization, and all these other things that we could go into, David's able to maintain the status of being a David and crush a Goliath. Now, Goliaths need to learn and remember how to think like a David, and that's how they can get better at whatever it is that they do to become more competitive, to maintain their competitive position. But competitive is only one aspect. You become more collaborative, more creative, more cooperative by understanding these things, and that's how I think that people achieve real meaning, lasting success. And also too, how they're able to navigate the constant change of their marketplace, the family dynamic. Everything is constantly in a state of change. Everything's in a state of ceaseless flux.
Mm-hmm.
We have to maintain that ability to disconnect our model, whatever we think was true, we realize it's not. We have to be able to disconnect and move to the next thing and keep. That's the speed that you're talking about. That's the quick and deliberate decisions, quick and deliberate action.
So I have a couple more questions to ask
Sure.
you before we're done. The first is, let's say a member of Congress or the White House calls you this afternoon and says, we now recognize we're in trouble. What do we need to do? And we said, and we recognize that our trouble is not just within our own circle, it's global. What should we do? What's the advice? What is the advice that John Boyd would offer to people who are at the highest echelons of leadership in the world?
Well, what I love about that question is that if you go on cspan.org and type in John Boyd, you can see him do that himself.
Yeah, I know.
And I couldn't say it better than his own words.
Yeah, those congressional hearings were quite interesting to watch him in.
Oh, I get chills thinking of it, because I can see him in, like, he wore this outrageous outfit on purpose. If you read his bio by Robert Quorum, which I'm sure you have, and I would recommend that others do.
Yes.
He intentionally dressed that way so that he would not be forgotten. And he essentially spoke truth to power.
Yeah.
And I've watched that over and over and over again. It's just absolutely brilliant. I think that, the cohort that you're asking me, how would I advise them? I mean, I have to be empathetic that they're all there at the pleasure of the voters, right? And they're all there at the pleasure of maybe opinion. But I read a book as a young kid called Profiles in Courage by a then Senator John F. Kennedy. A lot of times people do the right thing and say the right thing and act, quote unquote, the right thing or the effective thing or the maybe the optimal thing, and they're outcast. They're
yeah.
I forget the name of the person, the one that was the deciding vote in the Andrew Johnson impeachment. It's featured in Profiles in Courage. Ruined him, like absolutely ruined him. He was an outcast. Boyd, if you read his biography as you have, and others would find that Boyd was universally disliked by a lot of the power establishment, a lot of the people that you're mentioning, because he was challenging them to do things differently, better, and somehow he was still able to sneak in spite of the opposition and the friction that was being thrown on him. He was still able to create the definitive air-to-air attack study as a first lieutenant and captain in the U.S. Air Force. He was still able to create energy maneuverability theory, which informs airplane design. He was still able to come up with patterns of conflict and influence the Marine Corps and all that, in spite of the fact that he was something of an outcast. And really, that's our mission, by the way. I mean, that's because he was outcast, and because, like, in that situation, he would probably be wildly unpopular and disregarded, even though we might think that he was right. He was never afraid to do that, because he believed it to be the right thing. You're familiar with the fork in the road that somebody comes to. Do we do something, or do we be somebody? If we be somebody, we're going to get all the promotions and all the money, and everybody's going to like us. But if we do something, they're going to dislike us. They're going to hate us, because we're the ones that are going to be bringing change. We're the ones that are going to take people out of their comfort zone. We're the ones that are actually going to make, in the long run, real progress. And that's probably why we're still talking about John Boyd almost 30 years after his passing.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we will be on. That's our
I think Boyd understood that he was probably brighter than everyone he was going to be standing in front of, and that if he tried to win them by charm and sucking up to them, that he would lose, and that he had to speak honestly from his own core integrity to bring about the kinds of changes that he did. So it's, to me, he's this kind of archetypal leader where you do everything you do without ever having any expectation or anticipation that you're going to succeed, but you do it because the mission is that significant and that important, and that's the thing.
My favorite leadership word is characterized by Boyd in most sense of his personality and action. Not all, because he was sometimes not this, but he did approach it with a inordinate amount of humility. And there were times where he was proven wrong, that he readily disconnected from whatever it was before and made the adjustment. An example that my business partner and co-host on our podcast, CONTRA FRAME, likes to bring up is that as Boyd was developing energy maneuverability theory and things like the aerial attack study, and they're talking about the design of planes and how to make the design more agile, adaptable, and to reduce energy and have a higher turn radius and that sort of thing. It was one of the Top Gun, I believe the founder of Top Gun, Punch would have to maybe correct me on this, but said, well, what about the pilot in the cockpit?
Yeah.
Right. And then that, and he adjusted for that, because that was one thing that hadn't been considered by him in that work. And he made the adjustment. He wasn't afraid to have the humility to stop doing something when it proved to be ineffective or when it proved to be inaccurate. And he did. And as someone that's been in his archives a few times and have gone through, he did his homework.
Yeah.
He really, really, really did his homework. And he would counsel others that are in his circle as they were reforming defense and other things. Always have to have your homework done, because you get to the point where they're not able to argue against objective truth, they're going to have to resort to name calling or ad hominem attacks, that kind of stuff. And then you know that you've won.
Yeah.
But the humility, I think, would be the leadership trait that people might consider, because, as Boyd has shown us and others, you might be wrong. It's likely that you could be wrong. And the truths that we hold on to, I think it was Will Rogers or Mark Twain, I always screw it up who it was, or it's credited both maybe. It's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you absolutely believe that is true that turns out not to be so.
Right.
And if you can't let go of that and move on and reorient, you're not going to be able to adapt. You're not going to be able to
it's a great principle. Okay, my last question is,
okay,
as a father and as a husband, how does all this factor into how you live with your family?
Possibly easier than many, because I'm married to a registered nurse, critical care nurse, who is a school nurse now and deals with lots of emergent issues in the school district, but began her training as a neonatal intensive care nurse.
Oh, wow.
And I have handed the OODA loop sketch, right, that we're all very familiar with, or, if you Google it and it's the Wikipedia page, I can't tell you, including her, I can't tell you how many nurses I've just handed that to, and I say, look at this, I'm not going to say a word, just look at this and tell me if this makes sense. I'm batting 1,000 on that. Nurses, emergency doctors, emergency personnel, they all get it. They look at this and they go, man, this makes more sense. So in that respect, as a husband, it's been fun. Certainly you can imagine there's things that she tires of hearing. But no, she completely gets it. Our children, all 4 of them, are year-round athletes. I have 3 year-round swimmers and a year-round rower. And in all that too, they've still managed to fit in lacrosse, field hockey, baseball, other things. They have been learning this stuff since day one, because they're also doing this all day long, and I'm giving them awareness. And I use my youngest, she's 14 now, going on 40, but probably since she's been 8, 9 and on, I would tell people would say, this is too esoteric, or this doesn't apply to us, or this doesn't make any sense. I said, if you like, I will bring in my, as she's aged 8, 9, now 14-year-old, if you'd like, I'll bring her in and she can explain this on how it applies to her lacrosse team, or how it applies to her field hockey team, or how it applies to, she's played volleyball and other stuff. And it'll be a sound, tight explanation of how OODA functions, and how we reorient, and how we make decisions, and how we identify that the opposing team is not doing it. So I guess I'm lucky in a lot of respects, and blessed as a father, husband, and father of 4, and having them in those sorts of fields and interests has made it, in this case of Boyd, like I said, might be a little easier than most.
Well, I think it's a great thing, as long as you're not teaching it in the abstract, as long as this is relevant to how we go through our days. I think that's where it really matters. And, I figured out early on that I needed to treat my children as adults as young as I could, so that they would learn to make their own decisions. And I don't know if we've ever talked about John Boyd. I think they were too old. They were far older when that I came to know about Boyd, but all those kind of principles that underlie Boyd were already there in my thinking, and how we would approach things. So I never answered any questions. I said, so what do you, where do you go with this? How are you going to answer this question? That sort of thing. So
they come home. I mean, again, I have a daughter in college. I have 2 boys in the high school and a daughter in middle school, but there was about 6 or 7 years where they were actually formally homeschooled. And then with COVID lockdowns, they got 2 additional years of virtual homeschool. And a lot of that downtime we filled with learning and experiences that they wouldn't they wouldn't get elsewhere. So they, you know, they would come home from school, and even you know, I've had my daughter call me in college, and she wanted some help or whatever on a paper. I'm like, well, honey, you don't believe this, do you? She's like, well, no, I know it's not true. I just want the grade, you know, so they're still challenging assumptions, which is good. Yeah, because a lot of the situations that they're in, I tell them, don't fight with professors or teachers. They're getting you to memorize stuff or learn stuff out of a book that they're subject to. Just go with it. Even if you think it's wrong, you still have to have that perspective. You can't inform your own perspective if you don't explore its opposites, if you don't take the contrapositive. Again, this is all channeling, I think, things that Boyd, as we discussed before we started recording, you know, I went to Jesuit schools. That philosophy of learning and thinking goes right with Boyd. You have to take the opposite side. You can't just take your one view. And I guess maybe to bring it all back to what you were saying earlier about the times that we're in, you know, the silencing, the canceling, the utter disregard of an opinion, regardless of what you think about it, if it differs from yours, rather than saying, I think you should be taken away and removed from the world. You know, even though I don't agree with you, I need to understand that because I can get stronger in my own thinking. I can't just have it all one way. Otherwise, then I'm allowing my orientation to be static. And
I totally agree. And I think the time for learning about Boyd and others who are like him, I think is now. And
there's a lot.
and this is an opportunity for all of you who are listening and watching. This is an opportunity for you to reorient to how you see your life. I'm not necessarily saying you need to have a different purpose for your life, but how you approach the daily living of your life. This is what we're talking about. So, Mark, I'm glad you've been on here. So, tell us a little bit about how we can find you if people want to reach out to you.
Sure. So our company website is aglx.com. Our LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to follow me. No Way Out is on Twitter. You can find No Way Out on Twitter. I'm Mark McGrath in Columbus, Ohio, and I put a lot of this content on. I mean, it's how you and I connected,
right?
and how we met, and how I've connected with a lot of wonderful people that are on this journey with us, you know, of learning. It is kind of Boydian in the sense it's pulling from all backgrounds, all disciplines, all corners of the earth that are engaged in this, and it's really exciting in that respect. But LinkedIn would probably be the easiest way to follow myself and to follow Ponch. And then our podcast, No Way Out, it's on iTunes, it's on Apple Podcasts, and it's also on Spotify and Amazon Music.
Good.
So that.
Good. Well, maybe if you could send me what you think would be some good material for people who do not know about John Boyd, this would be an introduction to them. So we can encourage them to kind of begin to associate with themselves with them, and then by extension with us. So we begin to develop, we strengthen our network of people who share some of the same ideas, share some of the same sense of mission, and I think that
and those that don't because they help us understand things in a different respect. Boyd said actually I had it up because I was explaining it to someone in patterns of conflict. So if you go to slightly-east-of-new.com, and that's Chet Richards' blog, and you hit on articles, and he has all the Boyd articles that have been written by Boyd, all the briefings, but
I will link to that.
On page 144 of Patterns of Conflict, it's titled Theme for Vitality and Growth, and he includes it's called IOHI, Insight, Orientation, Harmony, Agility Initiative. That was one of the additions late in his life that he added. But our aim, it says, is to improve fitness as an organic whole, to shape and expand influence or power over the course of events in the world. And one of the things that he had precedes that, it offers a way to expose flaws of competing or adversary systems. I can't know hot if I don't know cold. I can't know cold if I don't know hot. So And I think as people find, as they dig into Boyd, and people that are legitimately interested in pursuing Boyd, they pull from all disciplines. We might have very strong beliefs, but I think that they're loosely held, and we're ready to continue to learn. But you can't know about competing or differing systems. You can't. It helps. You can't understand your own better if you don't understand somebody else's. And I think that's the other leadership word I'd use, other than humility, is empathy. And I think that they go together.
I totally agree. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mark, for coming on. It's been great. I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to do this. And
no, I can't wait.
Yeah. And thank you very much. And thank you all for watching. Please subscribe, hit the like button, but even more so, please comment so that we can be in conversation with you and hear what you have to think, and what you have to say, and what you think. And maybe we will gain something by your perception of what you're hearing that will advance what we're doing. And I would be very grateful for that. So thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. All right.